in all probability, it will raise the cancer risk level a certain amount above what it would be without it. And then it becomes the decision of the regulatory body of how much is acceptable. Cancer, that's very low. That's very low. But the cleanup standard is, if it raises it above that, you have to clean it down to that. But the public may say, oh, you left something in place that's going to give me an additional cancer risk of 1 to 10 to the 6th. They don't even understand what that means. You know, that's 1 in 100,000 chance, extra chance of getting cancer. Eating eggs that contain benzene probably raises their cancer risk more. But they don't understand that. So that's why risk in public hearings, professional meetings, presentations, working groups where you bring in the government with the industry to talk about and to understand what the issues are. And then making sure that the public understands. I don't know about in Azerbaijan now, but so I want to leave you with this thought that someone had this in a presentation in 1984. It deals with environmental. I think you could change environmental to a lot of other words. But when you're actually looking to solve a problem, there are 3 issues. In environmental issues are emotional. People don't like having funny smells in the ground or the water tasting funny. They become very emotional about that. They want clean water. The public is crying for it. Or if we clean it up, it will mean the end of a company that employs 1,000 people in town. So it's political. And then ultimately, the solutions are technical and scientific. We have low temperature thermal desorption, we have vapor extraction. We have all these technologies to clean it up. And we can clean it up to safe levels. Ultimately, nothing will happen. They're clamoring for the cleanup to happen, or if they're political. You have to address each of these in an environmental situation, or you will not win, and we will not be better off for it. So, you're environmentalists, you're scientists, you think that what you know how to do is going to carry the environmental day, and certainly a lot of what we saw yesterday, and I guess is going on now at Interpol and the Environmental Olympiad, those are the scientists of tomorrow. I hope that they understand that to solve the problems, they're going to have to be good politicians, and they're going to have to be socially aware. So I want to thank you.
Thank you, Professor, for very actual collaboration presentation, because it is also important for us to present the existing pollution results of Soviet Union period and have such kind of preventive methods for the future possible pollution. So maybe I will have some questions to Professor, and he will be able to answer any questions.
What about the current situation in Kuwait? Are some measures taken to stop it?
The current situation in Kuwait is that the UN awarded Kuwait $3 billion in 2006 and put together a program that was to be followed in the cleanup. To date, nothing has been done. There are 3 phases of the cleanup. One is to present a scientific advisory board that would oversee the cleanup. The second phase is to get an environmental management team in place that would manage the cleanup and then identify the technologies and the people to use those technologies. So I actually was involved in proposing to be part of the scientific advisory committee. As it turns out, politics, let's say, got in the way, and it took longer just to get, they don't even have an advisory board in place yet. They were supposed to get a call for proposals out for the management plan 18 months ago. It just went out about 2 weeks ago. It's taking a lot longer. Kuwait did do some work internally over those, over this last 17 years through the Kuwait Institute for Scientific Research. They did a lot of work on bioremediation, which is having microbes, the microbiology of the soil, the microbes, break down the petroleum. They do that by increasing the number of microbes, giving them some nutrients, watering it, and given that in Kuwait it would be 125 or 130 during the summer, it really is a nice environment for microbes. And so they've done a lot of work in bioremediation over those 17 years, but it hasn't been at the scale of actually applying, doing the cleanup.
And what do you think, what are the chances of anything will be done in the future, in the near future?
In Kuwait?
You know, stuff.
Well, I think something will be done. It will be done, a lot less will be done than probably should have been done 17 years ago. I think some of the proposals in Kuwait are quite frankly irrational. The UN has indicated that bioremediation would be the main technology for cleanup. But there are, around the oil wells, it's so heavily polluted and contaminated with oil that bioremediation won't work. So their policy put forth was that they proposed digging landfills in Kuwait. But you tell me if this makes sense. You go out into a clean desert and you dig a clean hole, and then you dig up the polluted sand from around an oil well and bring it to the clean hole and cover it up with clean sand. It doesn't make any sense. I would think leaving it around the oil well and perhaps letting the sand come in would be a better way. You have to understand that groundwater in Kuwait is maybe 150, 200 feet. It's very solid. The movement of any contaminants from that oil down to the groundwater would be very unlikely.
Thanks a lot.
From State University. Have you any data about oil pollution, deep of oil pollution in the various types of rocks? For example, sandstone, siltstone. Have you any data of deep of oil pollution in the sandstone of siltstone? Various types of rocks.
Is there pollution there?
Deep of pollution.
Deep of pollution. In Kuwait or just in general?
For example, the sandstone or siltstone.
Well, in Kuwait, there's no indication that it's gotten below the top, I would say probably 10 meters or so. It's very cement-like. They have a name for it, it escapes me at the moment. But there are cases of pollution in the U.S. in rocks. It goes way down because there are fractures and it will follow the line. With crude oil, it's difficult to know what is pollution and what isn't pollution. It's a natural substance. And so if crude oil is in the ground and has never come up and gone down, it's just in the ground, it's not contamination per se, it's a resource. So if it's down there naturally, I wouldn't consider it a contaminant. I would consider it a resource.
Thank you.
Mr. Paul, I have a question. How is the oil pollution, especially in Azerbaijan? Yeah, how is the appreciation of oil pollution?
Well, I've only been in Azerbaijan 2 days. so I haven't really seen it. I think I've smelled some oil, but it could be the refinery process. I was along the water. I didn't see sheens of oil in the water. I know you've got a, what, 160 years history of oil pollution. I mean, no, excuse me, I'm sorry, oil production. That was oil production. From what I've seen, I haven't seen a great deal of it firsthand, but I haven't been around more than 2 days.
Your suggestions on how these pollution issues can be dealt with, of course, is very insightful, but it's obvious that it's based on the US experience. But in this country, or I guess I missed the Kuwait part, I guess also in Kuwait, the procedures, decision-making, all these things are very different. And also the public's approach. For example, in this country, I don't think that environmental issues are emotional. I mean, we rarely actually hear about those things. So if you look at it from that perspective, does it bring any implications, perhaps how we can change it to adjust it to the local setting?
Well, again, I've only been in the country for 2 days, so I'm not going to venture a guess. I'll take your word on it in terms of emotion. But I have to tell you, with the Olympiad yesterday, and these were, I guess, people from all around the world, but with some people, I mean, actually the younger children. If environmental issues aren't emotional yet, I think they're going to be. These kids are pretty excited about the environment and climate change, things that go beyond just, everyday source of pollution. So I'd like to believe that they'll probably become more emotional as time goes on. Politically, and given the economic position of Azerbaijan right now, meaning, as I understand it, with the price of oil in the last couple of years and the contract of the century, that it looks like Azerbaijan is positioned well in terms of growth and development and resources. And so I would like to think that the private sector would sit down with the scientists, if you will, and the government, and approach this in a rational way, because it's tough when the economy is poor to convince a company that they should do something environmentally responsible. But I think when there are resources and things are good and times are growing, then that's when you should get people at the table and put something rational in place. I think that's the key. It's got to be something that that people in industry can accept and keep growing, that government can accept and know that they're doing the right job in protecting the health and the environment of the people. And then ultimately, if people do become emotional, they won't become that emotional because they'll know that there's been a rational approach to it. I think that's the only, the only advice I could give.
My belief is that in the United States, in Western countries, it was largely the public pressure that forced the governments, private enterprises to follow these kind of policies. Do you think that without the first thing being in place, the second part is possible? Thank you.
Well, it was public pressure in the U.S., but it was public pressure because of, I think, some catastrophic events in the U.S. Kind of like Kuwait, but in a different way. For example, the environmental movement, if you want to call it that in the U.S., occurred because of some major catastrophes. We had Love Canal. Love Canal, I don't know if you're familiar with that, probably not, but that was back in the 60s. It was an old chemical, it was in Buffalo, New York, and it was a lot of chemical facilities, and they dumped all of their extra chemicals and waste into a long lagoon, and it was a long canal, and covered it up. And then they decided to sell the property to the city for $1. And so the city bought it and built houses on it. And then all of a sudden, people were getting cancer, people were dying, and people said, well, why is this happening? And they found out that they were living on a toxic dump. And it was a major deal. It made people think it was a catastrophe. We had others down in Texas with dioxin, a particular type of chemical. The point being is it didn't grow slowly. There were catastrophes that made the papers, that made people say, wait a minute, the government hasn't looked out for me because they allowed us to build the houses on the chemical. So I think it's different, and hopefully, God willing, you won't have that situation in Azerbaijan. It's just a matter of perhaps of not being that the government or industries not being that aware of the environmental issues for whatever reasons, politically or otherwise, and now having to address those, but in a quieter fashion, if that makes sense. So I don't know what the answer is. I think there's a difference between the U.S. and the situation now. But hopefully, like a lot of things that are happening now in the world, every country won't have to go through the same evolution of thought and of emotion and of action, because they'll learn from other countries, other situations. You know, there's the term, the world is flat now, and hopefully it's flat, meaning people can learn from situations in the U.S. and in Kuwait and not have to go through and take the same time period. Hopefully.
I guess no other questions, and now I want to invite here our Mr. Rector, Professor Ahmet, to present additional